Okay, it's time for a bit where we remind ourselves, because we should all be aware of these political ideologies and philosophies that are flying around and that have been prevalent across our lifetimes. All right, today we're going to talk about another offshoot of liberalism. We covered classic liberalism and modern liberalism. I wasn't going to bother with neoliberalism. I was wondering if I was going to stumble on that one today, but I am going to, because it's time to look and see how much of the public services have been outsourced. Okay, so first up, we'll have a look at what neoliberalism is. What is neoliberalism? Neoliberalism is a political and economic ideology championing free markets, minimal government intervention, privatisation, deregulation, reduced public spending. Believing these foster growth and freedoms though it's often used critically to describe policies that increase inequality and market dominance in public life. Rooted in classic liberalism, it gained prominence in the late 20th century through leaders like Thatcher and Reagan, advocating for private sector efficiency over state controls in areas like welfare, education, and utilities. What are the core tenets of neoliberalism? The core tenets of neoliberalism: free markets, belief that unregulated markets are the most efficient way to allocate resources and generate wealth. Deregulation, reducing government rules on industry, finance, and labour. Privatisation, transferring public services like water, energy, education, healthcare to private ownership and management. Reduced government, smaller state focusing on law, order, property rights, and strong defence rather than social welfare. Individualism, emphasis on personal responsibility and individual choice, often framing poverty as individual failure rather than systemic issues. Key policies and examples: deregulation of industry, the airlines, the banking sector. Okay, there are a couple of privatisation, state-owned enterprises. We have got plenty of examples of that. We've got down in England, there's the water companies, there's the electricity, oil and gas, the railways. So there's plenty of them. Austerity measures. Well, we've been living in a period of austerity now since David Cameron and George Osborne came to power. And promotion of free trade and globalisation. Well, that actually is collapsing at the moment, but we'll get to all this stuff. Increased, and the criticisms of it increases inequality. Critics argue it widens the gap between rich and poor. Erosion of public services is another criticism of it. Privatisation can lead to higher costs and reduced access for vulnerable populations. And market fundamentals, accused of prioritising markets above all else, ignoring social cost. And the rise of market logic, extending market principles into non-market areas like education and healthcare, which we have seen, and we'll cover that a wee bit more in a minute. Okay, we go into usage. Often used pejoratively by critics to describe policies they oppose rather than self-identified by opponents, associated with shifts in public policy globally since the 1970s, influencing institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. So we'll go back to the start. And what is neoliberalism? It is a political and economic ideology championing free market and minimal government intervention. It also champions corporate governance, which is the next area we are going to cover. We'll talk about who do the UK government subby work out to. All right. Now, the UK government outsources services to a range of private companies and third sector organisations with key players including large outsourcers like Capita and Mighty and Circle, alongside more tech consulting firms like Accenture and Deloitte. And specialist providers covering everything from IT and facility management to healthcare support and prison operations. The large firms are designated as strategic suppliers for the government, and it's for critical areas like defence, IT and telecommunications. But contracts also go to smaller firms and mutuals, with recent examples showing firms like Reed winning large contracts. What do Reed do? Reed are a recruitment agency, and a lot of the people who work in the civil service come through Reed, or are part-time workers or temporary workers through Reed. Okay, now key companies and sectors involved. Where do the government outsource? Well, they outsource IT and technologies to providers managing large IT systems, data services and digital platforms. Capita, Fiduciary, who has been owned by the nurse of the post office. And we've just had Palantir given the job of storing all the information for NHS England. Right, the facility management and support. What does that mean? It means firms handling buildings, security, cleaning, catering, and other essential services. Mighty, Sudoxo, G4, ISS, they're all doing jobs that should be civil service jobs. And where it would be cheaper for it to be civil service jobs. Okay, now in defence, companies in defence and logistics and security services are outsourced, including prison management, and they go to Circle and G4S. And now, Circle and G4S are actually running military security and military facilities, as well as some jobs in the border guard. They're providing logistics for the military. And of course, they are also, if you go to Faceless, for example, a base full of military personnel, you go in the gate and you deal with G4S. Well, it was the last time I was in, it might be Circle this time. Right now. But the idea that you've got a base full of military personnel and you're hiring in security for G4S and Circle, what's that all about? I'll give you another example of where money is wasted when it comes to the military. I mean, they outsource maintaining military housing, which is in a bloody state. They outsource it. Why? The Corps of Royal Engineers is full of sparks, joiners, plumbers, brickies. Military facilities should never be run down. The military's got a bloody army load of these people sitting about doing nothing that could be called to go and do these repairs. So why is it being outsourced when the military's got all the professions it needs within itself? Unbelievable. Right, well, let's get back to what else is being outsourced. Right, consultancy and professional services, firms offering strategic advice, HR, and that's Accenture and Deloitte.
The world was in great peril. The grifty bastards were being bullied by an evil creature that hid in the dark shadows of number 10, Downing Street, who had made it his responsibility to leave smelly presents in the shoes of the invaders of his home, and to out a notorious grifter known as Mr. Shifty McGrifty, who would swoop in like a big manly man and defend this cuddly, beardy, fat bloke with a six-toed Norfolk accent. He seemed so helpless and unable to stand up for himself, even though he was a fully grown adult who had not worn short trousers for several decades. But from out of the depths of unoriginality, crappy old sci-fi, shitcoms, and total boredom, to defend the grifty bastard came.
All right, in PwC. Health and social care providers for NHS support, call centres and disability employment schemes are actually subbed out for the Department of Work and Pensions to Capita, and they also cover migrant help. Now, when we talk about healthcare here, folks, you know, who are the biggest companies running GP services in the UK? Well, there's HRC Care, better known as Operos Healthcare, and that's currently the largest single provider of NHS primary care services by the number of practices, running at approximately 60 to 70 surgeries across England, particularly in London and the North West. The company was previously owned by US healthcare giants Centena Corporation, which sold it out to HCRG Care, owned by a UK private equity company, 2020 Capita, in December 2023. SSP Health also runs about 40 surgeries in the northwest of England. Malling Health UK Limited, now PHL, the company runs GP surgeries and urgent care centres, primarily in the Midlands, Cambridgeshire and Greenwich. And InterHealth Limited, the company operates around 13 GP services and a number of pharmacies in the northeast of England. One Medical operating under the name of One Medicare. This group has contracts for GP surgeries and urgent care services in England and Scotland. So there's another example of how it's outsourced. Another thing it's outsourced, which could be in-house, of course, is social care. And these things all become much, much more expensive. And the services suffer. So the real reason we're talking about neoliberalism is to get examples of where it's actually reshaping the state. So it hasn't just taken over important infrastructure. We now see the schools being privatised and managed by trust groups in England, which will eventually become companies. We've seen the healthcare service at primary care level being sold off or being taken over by large-scale hedge funds and people like that. As I say, the waste of public money there is in outsourcing things that could be done with a janitor, a single janitor, or maybe half a dozen janitors, being outsourced to companies like ISS, Serco, and GS4. So instead of a janitor nipping to the shop and paying 13 pence for 30 or 30 pence for a light bulb, coming back and screwing it in, job's a good one, it's costing you 26 quid call out fee, 16 quid for a bulb, and an hour's labour for the guy to fit it. So all of a sudden that 30 pence to 90 pence bulb is now cost you 40 quid. But it's important that people realise where the money, why it is things are so expensive. Because when you outsource, the outsourcing company needs to make a profit, but when you're in-house, you don't need to make a profit when it's a public service. So because they need to make a profit, public services suffer. So neoliberalism is an idea, is a bad idea, and it will be coming to an end shortly. As I say, what we don't know is what comes next. Do we go back to a form of social democracy where governments get back to focusing on the well-being of the people? Or do we go in a different direction altogether? Will it be a case of the state imposing itself on the people in a fascist way? Or will something new come out of the turmoil that we're going through just now? But one thing's for sure, it looks like the liberal and neoliberal experiment in the last 42 years is coming to an end. Is coming to an end. As I say, prior to the 42 years of what we call modern and neoliberalism that we've had lately, we had the 32 years of the socialist experiment, and prior to that we had what we call classical liberalism for a very long time, actually. So what comes next is the most important thing. But I hope that reminds us all of what neoliberalism is and how disastrous it has been for the people and the finances of the state. As I've just explained, you outsource or you in-house. In-house, the guy works for you, you send him down the shop, he buys the item that's needed, comes back with a receipt, horns it out. It comes out of the expenses for that particular area. And the guy, because it's already his job, there's no call out fee or nothing. He just gets a ladder out the cupboard, climbs up and puts a bulb in. But when you outsource, as I say, it's a call out fee, a bloody expensive piece of equipment, which isn't any more expensive for what you could have got done in the shop for 90 pence or whatever. And then, of course, an hour's labour for the person doing the job. All of a sudden, your 90 pence for Jack, who's there as a Johnny, nipping down the shop and buying a bulb, has become 40 quid. Madness. Madness. So that's neoliberalism, folks, and that's the consequences of it. And we have seen all the public services suffer because of it. Railway, water systems down in England, cost of power, electricity, cost of fuel. This is all because none of this stuff is no longer in-house, and the companies that are doing the outsourcing stuff, they need to make a profit. As I said, the madness of some of it as well. I mean, if we look at military housing, it should never have been the state. We're talking about the state of military housing being unfit for habitation. How can that be the case when the Royal Corps of Engineers has got brickies, plumbers, joiners and sparks coming out their ears? And yet there's the military outsourcing, repairing military accommodation. Giving it to somebody who wants to make a profit rather than care about the people who are in the accommodation. Madness, folks. Absolute madness. But as I say, that is neoliberalism. It is corporate governments, small state, where the government only deals with law and security. Neoliberalism is